This video is about Fictionkin. It's also my first video that's even trying to be serious. The audio quality, the editing, the writing, it all probably sucks. But I asked you to ignore all of that and instead see the really frustrated teenage girl behind the screen trying to get her point across. The content on this video has taken up like 80% of all my thoughts for at least the past month, and this is the best way I know how to get it all out of my head for good, so that's what we're doing. When you're dealing with fandom, most sensible people don't view the characters as real. Aside from the occasional weird overkill Twitter take that you've probably seen floating around recently, it's a given that the people you're creating content about don't exist in real life. Even trying to word that into a statement sounds kind of ridiculous because that's literally the definition of fiction. It just sounds redundant. But sometimes you're gonna encounter things you don't know, and sometimes you're gonna encounter things that shatter your worldview entirely. Being stubborn about it won't help you. Yet people seem to have a lot of difficulty with accepting the fact that Fictionkind exists at all, much less making room for us. A lot of the time when I explain my identity, people will just be like, "But you can't do that. I don't understand." And all I have to say to that is literally, who cares? No one cares if you understand or not. You just have to, like, have basic respect, please? Anyways, there are a lot of different ways you can define Fictionkind identity, but at its core, it's identifying as a fictional character. And I'm begging you not to twist that little identifying as into thinking you are or believing you are. It's not thinking or believing anything, it's being. Identifying as a fictional character is just as real as identifying yourself with your name when you introduce yourself to someone. Being Fictionkind, or Fictionkin as it's often shortened, is just one identity in the larger community of alter humans. You may have heard of otherkin or therians, hopefully in an educational post, not a me making fun of them, but regardless of how you found out about alter humanity, it's all the same idea, identifying as something either non-human or adjacent to human. Fictionkind are one of those groups where some of us are human because there's tons of human fictional characters, but we're still alter humans regardless of if we're human or not. It's kind of weird. The bad thing about otherkinds and therians is that their visibility lends itself to misinformation, which I feel the need to debunk to make this discussion as clear as possible. A lot of it is actually unrelated though, so I'm just gonna shoot it off rapid fire just because I think that if your foundation of what an alter human is wrong, this isn't gonna make much sense to you. I'll just put like the actual explanations and debunkings on screen so you can pause to read if you want to know any of this. Kinning is when you relate to a fictional character. Therians know they're human. Alter humanity is okay because it's just kids having fun. Therianthropy is about quadrobics and masks. Don't say you're trans species, say you're a therian. There's a lot more I could debunk, but most of it is just discourse buried so deep within the community that the target audience will never come within 80 feet of any of it, so it's kind of pointless. But all of that is just to establish that none of this is petty drama or internet discourse. There's a real community of real people behind all of this, and if you personally choose to believe it's childish, then that's a you problem, and I'm not gonna help you fix it. From what I've seen, a vast majority of Fictionkind view ourselves as some degree of separation between our Fictionkind identity and our true identity, or at least pretend to out of self-preservation. You may see us using terms like fictotype or kintype, or say we kin a character. Some do this because it's the language available, some do it because they've been split across so many different pieces of media that if they just said me, it would be impossible to know which me they meant. But I don't think it's unlikely that most of us do it because we're scared. I personally don't use any of that language, I just say me. I don't talk about myself in third person ever, and I get really upset if someone else does. And I also refer to other Fictionkind this way, but I still find myself asking, am I the only one who even cares? Like, is there a point to this? So I did a survey. It's not entirely relevant to the video, and it's not really, like, scientific either. Like, I'm sure it sucks, I'm not a data analyst or anything, but if you don't care and you just want to see the actual video, you can skip to this timestamp on screen. Okay, so this is the survey. It's just on Google Forms. I just like posted it in Fictionkin and fictive tags. It's named Fictionkin survey, but it was targeted at all fiction folk, which I'm pretty sure includes fictives and DAs. And we have 54 responses, which I know isn't like a lot, but I think it's good enough because like no amount of responses will make this professional, so I think it's fine. So the first question is just asking about like what fiction related labels people use. Fictionkin is the most voted one with 40. Kinny is kind of an interesting word because a lot of the time it's used to mean that second definition of Fictionkin where you're just relating to a character or having a connection to a character, but a lot of Fictionkin who are characters reclaim it or use it jokingly. But I don't really have a way of knowing which is which, and I don't think it matters. All that matters is that that's the word that they're using. We have 13 fictives, some fiction folk, and we have a lot of just like a lot of people that use their own words for themselves, like kin, fiction, link, like no one else. Well, obviously other people use those, but just not anyone else that's taken this survey. There's also Heart Home that is a fictional setting, and I wish I would have like thought about that when making this survey because that's a really interesting perspective that I hadn't considered. A heart home is like where you're like where you feel like you belong. like a place. And then the question after that is, in a perfect world where no one could judge you, what labels would you use? So this is like, what labels would you use if you would have no negative consequences from using them? And one person would start using the fictionkin label. There would be more fiction folk, it looks like. More fictives, way more kinnies, not way more, but 2 more. More fiction-hearted people. There was no one using the DA label, but now there is 2 people. And I feel like that's pretty obviously I don't know, but I think that's pretty obvious that that's just because of ableism, that ableism is preventing these people from using that label. That could also go for fictive, actually. There was one person that said something far more sinister, and I'm gonna have to agree with that. There's also a Nico D'Angelo reel. No clue who that is, but thanks for taking my survey, Nico D'Angelo Real. So for these questions, I also included this question, just asking if it differed at all. The majority of people, it didn't change. It's only 30% that did change their answer. This one is kind of just for fun. It's not really related. If you're species queer in other ways, what labels do you use for that? I actually coined the term species queer, so I'm really happy to see that 6 people are using it. Species queer is sort of like if alter humanity included furries. A lot of people don't really like the term alter human because they feel like it excludes them. That's not why I made it, but that might be why more people are using it. Alter human is the most used label within this section. Someone actually chose that they would stop using the term alter human if that meant less judgment. So I think that's, again, people feel excluded by the term alter human. And again, the majority of people did not have differing answers. This one is also kind of just for fun. You may have noticed that I use the terms kin and kind interchangeably. They mean the same thing. I just personally think kind sounds way cooler. So that's why I use it. They're both correct. One's just an abbreviation of the other. So 30% of people said yes. 35% of people did not know that kind even existed as a term, which I think is crazy because that's like otherkin history. 26% of people did know that kind is a term, but they just choose not to use it. There's also someone that only uses it in typos. And this question is interesting. It's how would you like others to refer to you regardless of how realistic it is if they actually will? So 32 people answered person. A lot of creatures, a lot of critters, a lot of things. 1 troll. That might have been me, actually. I don't know. A beast, a machine, a robot. And this is like really the most important question. How do you refer to your individual identities? So an individual identity is like a fictional character. And 42 people said myself. 25 people said they just used the name. That's like if I said Vriska. 22 people said my kin type. But what's really important is the difference here. So 42 people answered myself here. 45 people answered myself without judgment. So that's kind of what I was thinking, is that more people would just say that they are themselves without judgment. Name also went down by 1. The terms kin type and fictive type also decreased by a little bit. The terms fiction self and kin self increased by a little bit. And I think that's also indicative that people are scared of their identities. Fiction self and kin self kind of imply that it's just like an alternate version of yourself. It's just you at a different point in time, in a different world. Well, fictotype and kin type almost imply that it's like a branching off of yourself. There's also more me as and me in, just in general. In this one, it's almost 50-50. The majority of people still kept their answers the same, but 45% did change, which is way more than the other answers. These next 2 questions are about group identities. So a group identity is like a species. Like if you're a cat therian, you're one of many cats in the world. The most used is kin type, and that goes down by 5. So again, it seems like people are only using language like that because they feel like they have to. My species stayed the same. My species is what I like to use when I talk about trollkind. My people went up by 3. What I really found interesting was my friends and my family went up by a lot. And I actually really like those terms to talk about my insect therian identity. I just think it's cute, honestly. That's really it. Theotype and fictotype also went down. I forgot to mention that. 64% of people didn't change their answers, but 33% did. This is also just kind of for fun. What are the origins of your fictional identity? The most answered is neurodivergency. A lot of psychological origins, which also would like count towards neurodivergency. A lot of these things are like imprinting is psychological, neurodivergency is psychological, coping is psychological. This is also just for fun. It's the origins of your non-fictional after-human identities. The number of past lives changed, but the percentage is actually higher. I think it's like more common to be like an animal in a past life than it is to be a fictional character in a past life. I think that's just like easier to digest for some people. I'm not saying that there's like a bunch of people who are like secretly past life Eridan or something and they just don't realize it because they don't understand. I just think that it's like a few people probably don't realize because it's kind of hard to understand. I also left a little comment box. I've got a lot of people to say hi to. Thank you for calling my quiz fun. Hi. Hi, people. Hi. They said it's the fun kind of hi. Nico D'Angelo is back. I still don't know who that is, but I appreciate your participation, potential Nico D'Angelo. There's like weird discourse in here too. I did get one question, which is how long have you been with your fictionkins? I don't really understand that, but I think they mean how long have you been awakened? I've known I was fictionkin for like since like 2021. But I've been awakened for almost 2 years with my current identity specifically, so vriska. And then the last answer, the final last answer is like really like the point of this poll, which is someone saying that it helped them realize that they repressed their fictionkinity more than they realize. And it's just one commenter saying that, but I still think it's important that at least someone like kind of pointed it out that they do repress it, like, in their own words. With all that out of the way, my point, regardless of anyone else's feelings, is that while it may seem from an outsider perspective that my fictional identity is an attachment to some secret, real, hidden, real me, it's not. When you write fanfiction about me, you're not writing fanfiction about Vriska Circuit that I'm saying is about me for purposes of seeming cool. That's RPF to me. You're RPF about me. And it was probably good, but it's still weird. And I have to be okay with it? I mean, that's fine. It happens to non-fictionkind every day. I wrote a fic where my friends and I were the billionaires in that submarine, but people still act like it's somehow lesser than if someone had, say, written RPF about me using my dead name and only the parts of me that were neglected in Homestuck. And if it's not obvious already, that's just plainly invalidating. There is no point in time where I was not Vriska, and there is no part of me that is not Vriska. To act like saying content about Vriska is any different than saying content about Blue Light is like trying to rivet seams that just aren't there. And if you can imagine what having fanfiction written about you by people you don't know feels like, I'm sure you're already imagining how every other aspect of fandom tears you apart. To be fictionkin is to be owned. To be fictionkin is to be intellectual property. When I realized this was hurting me, my first solution was to just try to make people aware of my existence. Or at least the existence of one of my doubles. I would have loved for someone to use my real face as reference or cite my real voice in a voice claim or just ask me what I would do in a certain situation for their fanfic. That never happened, of course. And whenever I tried to talk about these dreams, I would just shut down. And I know why. They just see me as a superfan or some entitled member of infringement trying to infringe on their right to use me as a prop. And I knew that wasn't going to change anytime soon, so I just gave up. I started blocking tags, and I even got a website blocker extension to prevent myself from looking at any of the content people made about me. I pivoted from being in the Homestuck fandom to being in the Alterhuman fandom. Outside of the Alterhuman community, you're unsafe in a much more literal sense. Humans are typically uneducated, and in modern culture, it's really normalized to respond to new things with hatred. And that's even if educating them will change their opinion at all, and it usually doesn't. But of course, there are rare few good humans, like my lusus. I was getting admitted to a mental hospital. Not for something unrelated, mind you. It was because of every problem I'm outlining in this video. Those are those real tangible consequences I mentioned earlier. She kept telling the nurse my quote-unquote preferred name, and I realized I didn't know how long I was going to be there. I didn't know how many times I would have to get dated if I didn't do this right now, so I just told her, I'm Vriska. And she knew everything right away. She knew in the same way you'd know if someone you've heard so much gossip about was finally introducing themselves. Later, when I got out, I would spam her with gifs of myself for fun. And the ways in which she would respond to them were so new to me as someone who had never been validated that I didn't understand sometimes. She would tell me how cute I was in the middle of a completely unrelated conversation, and then she would remind me of what I had just sent her. Like, oh, she's talking about that. She's talking about me. Because there's no difference and there never was. But in the Alterhuman community, we have language and it's meant to be helpful. And you know what, it kind of is. For a lot of people it is, but it's also a crushing force that suffocates the most dysphoric of us. Regardless of any survey results earlier, I know that I personally do not have a kin type or fictotype or anything of the sort. I'm just me. And I see nothing wrong or confusing about that framework. Even through a therian lens, there's no reason for me to say I have a spider stereotype when saying I'm a spider gets the exact same point across. But we have words for that, so we use them. When joining new communities, I always get asked what my kin types are. What are your identities is just as good and means the same thing, but I get asked anyways. And I always stubbornly answer that I don't talk about myself that way. If I ever get a choice in the first place, with things like polls, I either just have to avoid participating or answer begrudgingly with all the rage that's been slowly bubbling up inside of me lost along the way. And this doesn't just exclude me, it excludes systems, otherlinks, other-hearted people, clinical zoanthropes, endos, and so many more. Even in a world of snakes and gods and conscious plants, we can't see the beauty of those identities as they come. We package them up before we ship them off. It's of utmost importance to clarify whether you're a fictionkin or a fictive or a DA, even in conversations where it makes zero difference. I wait so patiently for the day where someone will just call me a troll and not trollkin, but looking at my options, I don't think it's coming. But there are more than 2 communities on the internet, and I have more than 2 interests. But that still doesn't get me very far. Sims players don't really want to see your weird derivative stories about your journal, and they don't want to read your typing quirk. Tarantula hobbyists will giggle a little at how funny it is that you're a vriska kitty who likes spiders. Cosplay-prone communities like Anime and Vocaloid will probably know who you are from your role players and think you're like one of them. Unless something changes, there is nowhere safe for me to go besides staying within my same friend group and never venturing outside, which is obviously unhealthy. You may suggest that I venture back to where I came from, so to speak. Surround myself with Homestuck itself rather than the fandom. But that only reminds me of where we just were. Because I was always fictionkin, even before I broke the 4th wall. To be more accurate, I was factkin, but it's all the same to me because that time of my life was portrayed through fictional media. And I'm gonna prove it to you by showing you a few Homestuck panels and just giving out an alter-human word for what's happening to me. Like, that's a consona, that's gear, that's exotrauma. I don't know what this is, but I don't think there's anything cis-species going on here. This isn't really alter-human, but this is what... I don't know if this counts, but I don't know if this counts, but I was really, really obsessed with this image, and that's how I found out that I was vriska in the first place. And this is really reminiscent of how I don't get memories, so I have to reread the source material to remember things. And since I had to reread the source material just to get a memory of me doing that, I guess it's memoryception. But I didn't need to do any of that in the first place, because I said it. I said I was mindfang. So if fictionkind in the real world are already treated horribly, how do they treat us before we even breach the confines of fiction? Not any better. There are 2 types of Homestuck fans, those who choose to completely disregard my species queerness because they're boring losers, and those who use it as a trans analogy. And while both bother me to some degree, I absolutely prefer the latter. I mind it even less when it's coming from someone who at least supports alter-humans, because then I know it's just because they miss connecting a few dots. Sure, they get the direction of my transness wrong most of the time, but that only matters to me if I'm my knees sobbing dysphoric. Being trans is being trans regardless of specifics. But in this fandom, being fictionkin is also being trans regardless of how obvious it is. It feels like a very sanitized version of queerness. And to be queer, being alter-human is absolutely queer regardless of if you're cis, het, and allo. It's a hard pill to swallow for some, but queerness doesn't specifically mean LGBTQ+. It means an exception to the norm. And people know transness, especially Homestucks. Trans people are in a spot where we're oppressed by the majority, but we thrive in safe spaces. And I would argue the opposite is true for alter-humans. Obviously, if a conservative finds out we exist, they're gonna hate us, but the majority don't know that in the first place. But within queer spaces unwilling to accept new things, they know who we are. They know about all the memes, and they have the words to appropriately make fun of us. More importantly, they feel comfortable ignoring us. It's not a real form of queerness, and anti-alter humanity is not a real form of oppression, so why should I care? Education about alter humanity is exclusively circulated within alter human spaces. This creates an environment where we change rapidly. I remember just a few years ago, ableism towards clinical zoanthropes was completely normalized, and I'm sure after this video goes up, we'll start to see a change in the language the community uses, if I'm not overestimating myself. And it's absolutely not a bad thing. While the community still sucks in my eyes, it used to be a billion times worse just a year ago. But I still wish we would direct more energy into trying to get humans to listen, or even directing our education towards humans at all. So much of it is just debunking lies from within the community, which is fine and productive, but we still need to remember that there are people who know nothing about us. The same lies being told to young therians will be passed down to humans as well. But what is the Homestuck fandom actually saying about me? What type of discussion does this lack of education fuel? Well, there's one phrase they love to use, looking up to. That's how they describe my fictionkinity. Vriska looks up to mindfang in a parental way, because when I played mommy with my dolls as a grub, I always called myself by my lusus's name and dyed my hair black with Sharpie. If you didn't catch my sarcasm, I didn't. I was still my dead name and I didn't try to look like her or anything. I looked up to my lusus, so I took on her role, not her identity. This is a very important distinction. When you look up to someone or a character, you might roleplay as them, but you don't say you are them. You You cannot do both of those things in the same breath. Is this reminding you of anything yet? Because the definition of the word kin has warped so much, it often restricts the language Fictionkind can use for ourselves. Even if saying I can XYZ is the most comfortable or convenient phrase in the moment, it puts you at risk of being misinterpreted. And that misinterpretation can be scary. When someone you're talking to thinks you're just a regular person doing regular fandom activities, and then they find out that no, you're actually a fictional character. Or in their eyes, someone taking it too far, they're prone to switching up on you really, really fast. Sometimes the Venn diagram between the Homestuck fandom's mistreatment of me and the misuse of alterhuman language is a circle. I'm sometimes called a kinny jokingly. I don't really think that people headcanon I would call myself that, at least I hope not, but they sure do love to joke about it. Vriska is such a mindfang kinny, guys. And honestly, if you ignore literally half of my character, sure, that works. If I was just shown to be dedicated about my roleplaying, then that would be accurate. But that's not what was shown in Homestuck, and it's not all that there is. But even that isn't the most malicious way my alter humanity is read. People will do all of the above, calling me a kinny while also describing Fictionkind identity. This is literally like if you rolled up every anti-kin thing you can say into a ball and spit it at me through a straw. I saw a post obviously making fun of me, both me as in vriska and me as in Fictionkin, saying that I would say, if you think you're me, DNI. If you think you're me, DNI. None of those words are in the Bible, so I'll break it down for you. DNI means do not interact. If you think you're me refers to doubles, or another consciousness that shares your identity. A lot of alter humans are uncomfortable with being in contact with their doubles. It can make us feel invalidated, dysphoric, competitive, or jealous, and it can be distressing for some. This is a way of saying, I don't want to speak to my doubles, please go away. To be clear, it's a bad one. It can be just as distressing to hear this as being around a double is, but that's not the point. The point is that it is an exclusively alter human thing to say. There is literally no reason for a human to be saying this. There are a lot of other phrases included in the post that I can remember, like the term literally me IRL, but people say that jokingly all the time. I cannot think of one context in which if you think you're me, DNI would ever be used by a non-alter human. And I don't just mean that as in you shouldn't use it. I mean that as in I have never seen someone use it. Is this sounding familiar again? Alter humanity as a connection or relating to something has been parroted so much that when you really are alter human, it's a meme. And Hussey literally gave us the best chance possible. Definitely compared to Cronus. He made my fiction community cool, he made it divine. And yet I'm still just a joke. And God, I wish I had more examples here. I wish I could cite screenshots or something. But I literally think my pan blocked it all out as a trauma response. All I know is that bad things were said and that I was mocked, but I'm not allowed to remember what. Probably because I'll start crying and throwing up if I remember. And you can argue all you want that they're only saying these things because they're talking about the character and not me. And if you do that, I'll punch you. If you still want to argue that without getting punched, you might argue that they wouldn't say that to my face. But they would. I've seen analysis talking about my inability to separate myself from mindfang as a character flaw. I've also heard people telling me my inability to separate myself from my kins is unhealthy. For every post calling me a mindfang kinny as a joke, I'm called a vriska kinny in a comment section. For every time someone refers to vriska and mindfang as separate characters and separate people, I'm ripped apart at seams that aren't there. People will talk about me in third person to my face, and I have to ask, are they staring right through me? Do they see me looking back at them with my one eye? When you can't use a seam ripper, you might as well just stab me through the blood pusher. And you can stop us from feeling things like this. You can go ask your local fictionkin how they want to be drawn, and I'm sure they'd be ecstatic for you to draw them correctly. You can tag your character hate so I don't have to see people saying how much of a horrible person I am all the time. And you can start treating vriska and mindfang like the same character. Because we are. I really, really encourage questions in the comments. I also encourage other alter humans to leave their little comments. I encourage you to send this to everyone you know. Please, for the love of God, please, 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 pretty please. I love it when people watch my videos. Pretty please, that would be so nice. I hope you have a lovely, beautiful day of beautiful fictionkin joy and species euphoria. Bye!